Doctor?
What are you doing? I won't let you take her. This is our future. Think of all the lives we'll save.
I don't think a game has been discussed in such length like this ever. To call this game anything but polarizing would be disingenuous. Not since Game of Thrones Season 8 have I seen such a divide between the people and the critics in scores. I haven't seen The Last Jedi myself because I could barely get through the other Star Wars films, but I've heard that this game can be compared to that, and I can't imagine that's too flattering. The Last of Us Part 2 is a game that tries many things in its narrative and succeeds in very, very few. But I said that I'd give this game a fair shake and be as objective as possible, and that's what I'm gonna do. These are my own thoughts on the game. These are not echoed thoughts from anyone else. I've sat and I've thought about this for quite a while, and that's why this video has gone up a little bit later than other people's reviews. I wanted this to be as accurate as a portrayal as possible on my feelings towards this game. Once it's on the internet, it's going to live here forever. And whilst I'm aware that my feelings can alter over time, I gave this enough thought to be confident about what I'm about to tell you and feel concrete in my feelings towards The Last of Us. I'm going to start with the gameplay and then move on to the story and finish off with the politics, the audience reaction, marketing, and the social climate surrounding this game. These parts have less to do with the game and more to do with the lead up and its fallout. There is a lot to talk about here, and it's partly why I haven't shared my thoughts online or with anyone really on this game, because you can't water it down to a 5-minute voice note. I've been asked numerous times by several people to speak on it, and I felt it would be a wrong thing to do, and that's why I've waited to put this video up. There's a lot of people that want me to sit here and say nasty things about the game, so we can sit here and we can bitch about it, and there's a lot of people that want me to sit here and defend the game because of my appreciation for other Naughty Dog titles. Now this is a 25-hour game. In my opinion, you cannot release 5 to 10 minute reviews really covering everything in the game fairly. And unless you've played the game yourself, I don't think you can have a fully formed opinion. Well, actually you can't. You can't have a fully formed opinion on this game unless you've played it. Now a lot of people have the right idea about this game, but you can't only watch the cutscenes and think that you understand the full story. That is not how this game works. Some of the story is told during the gameplay, and you actually have to listen to what the characters are doing and saying whilst the gameplay is going on. It's not just in the cutscenes where the story is told. Now, as I said, some of the things you guys said have come out to be true, and a few of the things that we suspected have come to light, but you simply cannot have a full, well-rounded opinion on it until you play it. But I appreciate you guys stopping by to listen to my opinion. I am by no means encouraging anyone to go out there and buy it. I think everyone should come to that conclusion by themselves. Also, it should be no surprise, but I will be spoiling the entirety of this game. If I don't, this review will simply not be possible. So if you don't want to be spoiled, now would be the time to click off the video. There is no point during this review where I'm not going to spoil the game. One thing I will say to everyone, and they need to remember this, is The Last of Us Part 2 is a linear, story-driven game, and it forces you into scenarios to tell its story. So largely it will be measured by its story. It does not have the privilege or the luxury of, say, a fighting game or an MMO. In Tekken, if the story sucks, it's mostly okay because the bulk of the game is played online in a 1v1 scenario, and that's what people care about. In World of Warcraft, if the expansion story sucks, people have a million other things to do with their time in the game. But The Last of Us will never have that luxury because it lives off the back of its story. That's not to say nothing else has to matter in the game. Of course the gameplay matters, but if the story is bad, then ultimately the game will be dragged down a lot further than if it was just purely a gameplay driven game. So I'm going to be as fair as possible to this game. I'm going to speak about every single part of it, but just remember that for as many nice things as I'm going to say, none of it is really going to matter if the overall story is a mess and misses its mark. With that being said, let's get into it.
I have to finish it.
There's a cost.
We could have killed you. Maybe you should have.
To begin on a positive note, in the 25 hours that I played this game, I did not encounter a single glitch, not one. It was a smooth and seamless experience from beginning to end. Every jump onto a car worked as it should, every quick slither through a passage worked as you'd expect, and every interaction with an enemy started and ended in the way Naughty Dog had intended. I can't say I've played too many games that went on for this long and not encountered a single glitch, not a single hiccup, but that goes to show you how tightly knit a studio Naughty Dog is and how well they design their games. I'm not saying that there aren't any glitches in the game. I'm sure there's someone out there that has encountered a glitch or two, but for me, I didn't see anything, not even an inkling of one. I didn't experience any frame rate issues at all. It was just a smooth gameplay experience from beginning to end.
There's another one.
The sound effects are expertly implemented into this game. Every time flesh and bone meets metal, every time you reload a gun or take a shot at someone, every time you hear someone gasping for their last breaths as you retrieve your shiv from their neck or hammer from their skull, it's just so satisfying. I know that sounds kind of twisted to say, but you don't exactly want those parts of the game to be underplayed. The characters swing with a level of ferocity and malice that isn't present in other games, and I really appreciate the attention to detail here. It is well and truly brutal, and the sound effects have a lot to do with that. It goes without saying, but I have to speak about it anyway. The game is absolutely stunning. I don't think I've ever played a game that looks this impressive. Nothing felt jagged or like they didn't pay enough attention to one area. The attention to detail is actually insane when you consider all the little things they did. Down to your horse hitting the branch of a tree and the snow falling down as if it would in real life. The terrains are so impressive, it's easy to get lost inside them when the game allows it. It is a linear game, but it gives you the sense of an open world because the areas you go to are twice, maybe 3 times as large as the previous game. And I found myself exploring random houses and back gardens, or just having a look around at the vegetation that had taken over what was once a densely populated area. I even found myself watching a whole place up in flames whilst there was a big action scene going on just because of how mesmerizing it is. To see 2 factions battling it out while there's fire and brimstone everywhere was honestly a spectacle. Naughty Dog has all of my respect when it comes to presentation. If you told me this was a PS5 game, I would believe you. It is that far ahead of the curve in terms of graphics.
Okay, we gotta get out of here.
The voice acting in this game is another area that deserves nothing but praise. In terms of the performances delivered, it felt like I was watching a high budget Hollywood film or a highly praised series on Netflix. The voice acting and the acting in general is second to none. Everyone did a brilliant job, and for the little that Joel is actually in this game, Troy Baker to me is still the best. He steals the show as far as I'm concerned.
Is now really the time for this?
We traveled across the entire country to bring me to the Fireflies. I had so many questions for them. Why did you pull me out of there while I was still unconscious?
Because I let them run their tests. And when I saw that they were useless, I got us out of there.
How do you know they were useless? Maybe if you just would have given them more time, they could have figured something out.
There was no cure.
His portrayal of Joel and how he can make the player feel sad or happy through Joel is some of the best work I've seen in any video game. Despite my feelings towards the story and its characters, which we'll get into a little bit later, there's no denying that the voice work in this game and the acting will sit at the head of the dining table as the undisputed king of this generation.
Hey, this is a family event.
Sorry. Sorry.
Remember next time there's kids around.
Yeah, like you're setting such a great example.
Oh, just what this town needs. Another loudmouth dyke.
The fuck did you just say?
Ellie, Ellie, don't.
Get the hell out of here.
Get your hands off me.
Hey!
Enough. Come on, you. Let's go for a walk.
What about them?
You worry about yourself.
Let's get you some fresh air.
You all right, kiddo?
What is wrong with you?
He had no right.
And you do? I don't need your fucking help, Joel.
Right.
You pompous, stuck-up, snot-nosed, English, giant, twerp, scumbag, fuck-faced, dickhead, asshole!
The infected in this game are a disappointing part of it for me. It's been 7 years since the previous game and they haven't evolved at all. Even in game, it's like 4 or so years since the first game and they're still largely the same. There are some variations and some interesting boss battles, but the game is 25 hours long and you travel to so many different areas. I think what they could have done is have the virus mutate in different ways depending on where you are. There are parts of the game where you fight very large scale enemies that have mutated out of control, so it makes me wonder why they didn't explore more monster designs. Each area would have felt a bit more fresh, but enemies mostly act the same, so instead of having to come up with new strategies to try and defeat them, you're just doing the same thing over and over again. The game does make you run, scramble and panic, but not because you're unsure of your enemy's abilities, but because they just throw a ridiculous amount of enemies at you till you're forced to run. I think this is fine and there are some really fun moments where this happens, but it could have been cushioned with some evolving characters, maybe some evolving horde of the infected that act differently depending on the area you visit. To me, this is a missed opportunity. Also, outside of boss battles or areas where you have to deal with the infected as well as humans attacking at once, which can make for some really chaotic and fun moments, the infected are not very scary or difficult to deal with. Even on the higher difficulties, outside of moments where they pop out from the side of you, they're not that challenging to deal with, and so the fear that you initially have towards them quickly diminishes. They can still create some very tense moments, but I wouldn't say I was ever scared. I really like how they can make you think twice about entering a building after you can hear the infected making noise inside it.
I have Constance. She has to be down there.
But all in all, they're a disappointing part of the game for me. But I don't think they're terrible. They can still create tense and anxious moments, fighting hordes of them can still be very fun, but I just think the fear factor has been lost because it's a lot of the same thing over and over again, and that's a big deal because it is a game where the majority of it is focused around zombies. A lot of the people have given the AI a bit of flack for still being really dumb and easy to get around, but I played it on one of the harder difficulties and literally the smallest movements and these guys were on me. They actually made traversing some environments incredibly intense, way more intense than the clickers did. I'd say this is one of the better improvements from the first game, and what's even better is you really can't run at these guys when your cover's blown and expect to get away with just Nathan Draking everyone to death. You'll die really fast. Your characters react to every shot. When you're shot with an arrow, sometimes you'll have to pull it out. If you don't, it does damage over time. It's a nice little feature that does change the dynamic of you versus them in a gunfight quite a bit. The wolves communicate as you'd expect, but the Seraphites whistle to each other, so it's hard to know what they're planning on doing, like you would with regular enemies.
Fuck.
Also, an important thing to note is that when you're spotted in this game, enemies swarm you. They come from every direction. They'll run around you either side of the wall you're hiding behind and shoot you from both angles, and because your character will react in pain to every shot, you're pretty much dead at that point. That's drastically different from other games where enemies will walk into the same spot and get headshot over and over again. But as I said, I was playing on a harder difficulty, so I'm sure on easier difficulties it's going to be totally different, but I digress. Stealth is heavily advised and implemented very well because of this. I tried to run and gun a few times and each time I was left on the floor in a pool of my own blood.
Move it! It's not safe!
Puzzles are completely removed from this game, they're literally non-existent. They were barely in the first game, but for the people that wanted some Uncharted vibes, there's nothing. There's no puzzles at all. I don't think throwing the rope over a pipe to get out of a room is particularly a puzzle. Typically, I don't like puzzles, the more traditional ones, they're not for me. I always hope developers will come up with new, interesting ways to implement puzzles, but Naughty Dog got rid of them altogether. It's not really a complaint from me personally, but it'll probably disappoint some people that are a fan of puzzles. This is very much a shoot, run, hide game, and that's really all there is to it. There's nothing else really going on in the gameplay, which becomes a big issue for the gameplay, but I'll get into that in a bit. The one thing they did include in this game was the big set piece moments that we've come to love and expect from Naughty Dog's big games. They are some of the highlights of this game, and they really helped to elevate the gameplay. My favourite one personally was running through Haven as the Wolves and the Scars battled for supremacy. It's a shame that I had to play as Abby whilst doing this, but the moment is still appreciated and looked absolutely gorgeous. Unfortunately, in the 25 hours of playing through this, they felt too few and far between. I wish there were more of them because, like I said, they're great and they're grand and they're explosive, but the gameplay just slows down way too often for me. The combat in this game feels really nice and heavy. It's sluggish and just has this really heavy feel to it. Every punch to the face, every kick to the back, every neck that you snap via a headlock is just so satisfyingly brutal. And I've heard a lot of people say this game is needlessly violent, and I completely disagree. This game's violence is one of its high points. I much preferred engaging in hand-to-hand combat. It's just so violently done. To me, this game is far more brutal than Mortal Kombat, which is widely regarded to be the most brutal game of all time. Mortal Kombat has way more blood present, and there's a lot more heads exploding and limbs being torn off, but it's so over the top that it's basically comical. The Last of Us Part 2 is not comical in any way, shape or form. The violence is enough to make you cringe. It's enough for someone to pause the game and look away, and it's because it's so realistic. And I'm not even talking about the cutscenes, I'm strictly referencing the gameplay. Watching someone take their last breath as they pass out or have their neck snapped by Abby's juggernaut arms is enough to give those who are more squeamish straight up nightmares. With all that being said, the gameplay is far too simplistic for a game this long, and because enemies don't evolve much through the game, if at all, the requirement of mashing square up close becomes stale around 12 hours in, even before that. I don't mind the game being 25 hours long, but there needed to be a bit more to justify the playtime. As much as I appreciate that they were trying to tell a full story, they didn't pad it with enough new gameplay elements to make me want to pick up the pad. I did want to finish it for sure, but I wasn't as enthusiastic as I wanted to be. It was more to see where the story went rather than how the gameplay made me feel. But on the other hand, this game was never meant to be complex in its gameplay. It's a cinematic piece, and so it makes sense for the gameplay to be simplistic. It's a double-edged sword in my opinion. I understand why it's so simple, but the enemies could have evolved a bit more to keep the combat a bit more fresh and the shooting a bit more fun. On the topic of shooting enemies and the infected, I think the game again handles this quite well. Obviously it's a 25-hour game, so the issue of staleness is always going to be there, but the system is good. The guns are not super steady, so to give the realistic effect of one of us holding a gun and shooting someone, the sound of the bullets leaving the gun are loud and echoing, the explosion of flesh when the shotgun takes off someone's leg or head, it's all expertly done by Naughty Dog. Not to mention when you lay a landmine down and someone walks on top of it. It's basically just an explosion of blood. You'll see animal and human limbs just go flying all over the place.
Thought I saw someone. We'll look into it.
People scream out for their loved ones as they lay there themselves screaming their heads off. It's all designed to play into the narrative of revenge is bad and hate begets hate. It's to give you an idea that whilst you may think the people you're killing are heartless villains, they also have family and loved ones that they don't want to lose in battle. It's one of the things I actually thought was really cool about the game. With that being said, the dodge mechanic and the jump button are rubbish in my opinion. Let's start with the dodge button because it's god awful. This dodge mechanic does not work well at all because you're forced to use it. Where in Batman or Sleeping Dogs you have a counter button, but also have the option of beating your enemies to the punch to stop them from advancing. That isn't the case in The Last of Us Part 2. If an enemy starts their attack animation and swings at you, you have to dodge it, because at that point the enemy goes into a weird hyper armor state where your attack will have little next to no effect on them and you'll just end up getting slapped in the face. L1 is also the run button, and I found that dodging and running tripped over themselves a few times more than I'd like. The jump mechanic is hot garbage. It's literally pointless. If it wasn't there, it would make no difference at all. There's no utility for it outside of jumping to the next platform. It's a major step down from the Uncharted series, and even though this is meant to be a more realistic experience, there could have been something else they could have done with it. You don't even jump far, you're literally in one spot. It's like everyone did leg day and no one can move. It's a useless button really. If auto jump existed in this game, it would literally do the exact same thing. It's not a huge deal, but it's just a bit rubbish. As I said earlier, stealth has been implemented really nicely, and like I said before, at the higher difficulties, it is heavily advised because enemies will light you up and just overwhelm you. You can basically clear most areas without having to engage in an actual fight, which is much easier said than done. I tried a few times and got caught up almost every time, so I ended up running and gunning a lot of the time, but then I've never been great at stealth myself. Eventually I would give up and I'd start lighting the whole place up. Needless to say, I died way too many times.
Go around! Get the side!
The face-to-face fighting, gunfights and stealth all complement each other really well and work in unison. I just wish there was a little more variety and challenges you have to overcome to force you to use these mechanics in different ways. So that pretty much covers the gameplay and visuals and all of that stuff. I think it's safe to say that it's good, but it's not great, it's not amazing. It's definitely not masterpiece worthy. It does feel a little outdated and one-dimensional, but it's alright. I'm not gonna say it's trash by any means. Definitely not something that I deem the title of masterpiece, but not garbage. The graphics are top-notch and all things considered, the gameplay is alright. So with all of that being said, let's move on to what you're really here for, the story and its characters. Now, as I said, if the story is not good, it's going to drag the entire game down. So strap up because we're going to be here for a little while. This story is a contrived mess, completely devoid of any logic and fails to elicit the emotions it desperately craves from the player. This game spits on the memory of the first one in a way that is insulting and lazy. Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog try to teach you a lesson in this game, but all they have achieved is the destruction of their own characters. The game picks up where the original left off. Ellie and Joel have settled into a community and immediately has a very bleak vibe to it when it kicks off. Joel's explaining to Tommy about what he did to save Ellie's life. I want you to remember the look on Joel's face whilst he is explaining this, and I want you to remember the emotion Joel feels towards Ellie throughout portions of this game. I want you to remember how Joel has struggled for Ellie and struggled to protect her, and I want you to remember that even though Joel has made some bad and questionable decisions, that he loves Ellie unconditionally, as if she was his own daughter. Also, this is basically all you get to play as Joel, so just enjoy that, all 2 minutes of it. That is it. For the beginning portion of this game, you play as Ellie and get introduced to a bunch of characters, most notably Jesse and Dinah, both who are completely uninteresting characters. I don't know who wrote these guys, but like, come on, this could not be the best you could do. Did you forget how to write memorable characters? This game is 25 hours long and not once did I give a shit about either of these people. I didn't care about their motivations, I didn't care if they were safe, nothing. After walking around the town with Ellie, meeting the new characters and having a snow fight, the game changes angles where you meet Abby. You guys remember Abby, right? You remember when she broke The Undertaker's undefeated streak at WrestleMania? Yeah, that Abby. Seriously though, all jokes aside, look at this woman. Her arms are the size of Chi-Chi's dad's entire body. Her traps are visible through the top. I wish I had triceps like that. The game better make some sort of reference to a fully functional gym and a place for her to get all that protein, or I'm going to be asking some serious questions later. Okay, fair enough. But how long does she have to spend? You know what, never mind, let's just move on. So you end up playing as Abby for a little bit, whilst Ellie and Dinah are on their little side mission, doing their side quest stuff. Abby is getting herself lost in a snowstorm for no reason other than she's a stubborn meathead who lacks common sense. Abby then gets ambushed by the infected because she's being stupid, and whilst that's going on, Ellie is getting it on with the world's most boring side piece. Honestly, I can't bring myself to really care about this woman and her ties to Ellie. It's so boring and forgetful. She's not funny, charismatic, or anything in between. She's the human embodiment of those convos where you're like, hey, you okay? Yeah, you? Yeah? Cool. That is her. Abby's running with a horde of zombies goes from bad to worse when who should show up but the main man himself, Joel.
Give me your hand! We're gonna have to run! There's too many of them! I'll cover you! Keep going! Come on, let's
And that's who we all came here for, right? That's who we came to see. Well, don't get used to it. Honestly, what follows is a WCW level curveball that I'd expect Vince Russo himself to come up with. Now bear in mind, Abby was toast, she was done, the infected had got to her, but Joel just came in the nick of time and saved her life. Joel didn't have to do that. He put himself in harm's way for this complete stranger, and bear in mind, Abby has no idea that this is Joel at this point. And this is where the game gets incredibly stupid. This is the beginnings of it becoming a contrived mess. In the first game, Joel was a seasoned vet and highly cautious and suspicious of everyone. He was able to identify when ambushes were heading his way and would always take every precaution when faced with an uncomfortable situation. So what did he and Tommy do when they escape the horde with Abby and meet up with Abby's group? They give up their location, they invite complete strangers back to their town, and they both proceed to say their real names.
Really, nigga?
And you only have to look at the reaction of those around Joel. It was already tense in that room, but I don't think they actually knew he was Joel. And if it wasn't obvious by now, it's about to be. These guys were looking for Joel. Why, you ask? Remember that Dr. Joel killed in the first game to save Ellie? The one that picked up the shiv? Yeah, that was Abby's dad. So she's pissed off now, and she has her dad's killer right in front of her. A few problems arise with the storytelling here. As I've already said, Joel wouldn't have willingly given up his name to complete strangers, or even unarmed himself, or even put himself in the middle of the room completely surrounded. Joel's character was completely sacrificed to further the story here. This is bad writing. They couldn't think of a single way to have Joel killed other than to be killed for stupidity. You don't wash away all of that storytelling just to make room for your new story. You tell it in a way where things make sense. This did not do that. Abby is out looking for this man, right? That's her whole motivation. She happens to stumble upon this man when she's about to lose her life. This man then tells her his real name, completely unprompted. That's the story we're going with here. Alright, cool, whatever. Let's go with that stupid story. Secondly, let's not forget that Joel literally saved her life, but Abby, who I believe to be a complete psychopath in this game, is extremely quick to blow off his leg and then proceed to torture him, because that's what it was. She tortured him to death.
Y'all act like you heard of us or something.
Because they have.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Now I understand being upset that your father was taken from you. I understand that you'd want to kill your father's killer. But how it all goes down just rubs me and apparently millions of other people the wrong way. The game later wants you to feel sorry for Abby by experiencing her side of the story, and they have you play as her, but kicks it off in the worst way because Abby appears to be unhinged. She appears to be an unhinged psychopath with no emotion or remorse whatsoever. Now in this game, Ellie kills people and still exhibits emotion, like a normal human being would. But Scott Steiner over here doesn't even blink. I'll elaborate on this a bit more later.
Get her hand! Get the fuck off me!
Bitch! You got her! Look, you got her! Okay?
You're gonna fucking die!
What's going on?
Let him go!
Who is that?
Let him
She
go!
snuck in.
Why aren't you posted up outside?
We didn't think anyone was gonna show up.
What the hell did you expect?
We gotta get out of here before the whole town's on top of us. You're done.
You want what I want, right?
End it. Now.
Joel, get up. Joel, fucking get up. Please stop. Please don't shoot. Joel, please get up. No!
You dirt-eating piece of slime! You scum-sucking pig! You son of a motherless goat!
Obviously, for what Abby has done, you know Ellie is going to want revenge, and that is the central theme of this game. Now that you know the motivations of the two main characters, let's talk a little bit about the execution of the co-main character, Abby. The point of playing Abby is to feel sorry for her, to understand her, and to be sympathetic as to why she murdered Joel, and why she is the way she is. They introduce you to her community, her friends, and try to make you like her by showing some of the more playful moments she has with her friends and dogs. What better way to force emotion out of someone than placing a dog in the picture? This all falls flat because Abby is an unhinged lunatic who has no issues with killing her own people, never displays regret for her own actions, outside of one very spicy scene that we'll talk about a bit later, but mostly that she's a killing machine. She's kind of the toxic masculinity trope that the Starkesians of the world complain about. She's literally just a brute that punches and kills things. All she does is punch things really hard and shoots everyone, whether she's known them for a long time or not. She doesn't even blink. You even hear former comrades calling out her name in shock as she approaches them with a gun or an axe, just before gunning or chopping them down and moving on to the next. And just for context, these people did absolutely nothing wrong to her. She becomes friends with the enemy and just quickly starts killing at random. This character is not human. Her behavior is not human at all, and it's damn sure not relatable to the common sane person. Her and Ellie both seem to suffer from PTSD following the men in their lives being killed, but Ellie's feels legit, whereas Abby's doesn't, because at no other point does she even exhibit minor emotions for anyone else. It's like they're trying to force you to feel bad for her despite all of the near psychopathic behavior throughout the entire game. Her friends are gunned down around her in cold blood throughout the game, and she just keeps it moving, literally. There's almost no emotion out of her at all. On top of all of that, she tortured and killed Joe, who is clearly the heart and soul of this series. You might be sitting there wondering, well, what about her relationship with Lev? That should disprove the fact that she's a nutcase. But please do not forget that as you are running through Haven, she is actually killing her own people as they call out to her confused as hell as to why she is attacking them. These are people that she's grown up with, potentially protected at one point, fostered relationships with, sat down and eaten with, and she's literally hacking them down without any explanation. Oh, but this is part of the gameplay. No, stupid. Everything happening in this game is canon. So Abby gunning and cutting people up in her gameplay is actually happening. These are not just NPCs. What the characters say during the gameplay matters as well. This character is mad, and this was done deliberately. When you run into the open during the attack on Haven, there is no reason why Naughty Dog would program the wolves to call out to you in confusion and then get into gunfights with you if they didn't intend for Abby to murder them. They could have been programmed to assist her, but no, her character is irredeemable in my eyes. Need you not forget, the leader of Abby's group is Isaac, and the reason why Abby is one of Isaac's favorite people is because she is literally a killing machine and always gets the job done. It's something they actually reference in the game. Naughty Dog tried to make her someone that we sympathize with whilst literally turning her into the T-1000. Ellie tells her that Dinah is pregnant. Abby says good as she goes to slit her throat, and the only reason she doesn't is because Lev stops her.
Stop! She had nothing to do with this. She's pregnant. Good. Abby.
Abby is not a hero. Abby is the bad guy, and it is absolutely criminal that we are forced to play as Joel's killer for 10 hours. One of the biggest issues with this game is they dispatched the most beloved character in place of a new one, and she sucks. They made her hard to stomach. Even looking at it objectively, away from how you feel about Joel, it's hard to stomach her. It's not the first time this has happened in entertainment. When Negan originally appeared in The Walking Dead, he smashed Glenn over the head numerous times repeatedly to the point where people couldn't watch anymore. It's honestly one of the most harrowing scenes in the entire show, and whilst Glenn wasn't the main character, he was as close to the main character in terms of being loved by fans as possible. Initially, people hated Negan for that, but Negan was so charismatic and so easy to be drawn to, people ended up putting aside their hate for him and what he did for Glenn and began to like him. His charisma almost forced you to change your hate into love for the character design. Negan became a mainstay in the series and became so popular that he actually joined a fighting game. He's in Tekken, which is the craziest thing. Negan entered as a hated villain, but due to good writing and pacing for the character, he became one of the most beloved characters in the show. A character arc that comes full circle. You're never expected to like Negan, and the show never tries to blatantly force you to like him in any way, especially not with stupid plot devices and shoehorn stories. It happens organically, but that isn't the case with The Last of Us Part 2. It's the same with Game of Thrones. Forget in Season 8, Game of Thrones was a show that would take a beloved character and kill them off without a moment's notice, but the show was brilliant in building up new characters and other characters to make you fall in love with them, and they would fill the void that the previous character left. That does not happen in this game. Nobody cares about Jesse, nobody cares about Dinah. Nobody cares about Owen or Mel, and you damn sure don't care about Abby. The game does a lousy job of making you care for anyone except Ellie, and you mostly care for Ellie off the back of the first game. But also, I guess as a player, you're feeling the same emotions, the same rage that Ellie feels when she witnesses Joel's death. There are only two of the new characters I can say were a little bit interesting, and that is Lev and Yara. They're two characters that have escaped the Scars or the Seraphites, which are the crazy religious ones. They're a rival faction to the Wolves, and also they're more of the villainous type in this game. Actually, everyone just hates these guys. They're seen doing some pretty disgusting things in the name of their ideals and their religion. Lev is referred to as Lily by some of the people that are hunting him, and his sister later confirms that Lev is trans.
How much did he tell you?
Not much. I heard some of your people calling him Lily.
For a long time, I didn't understand why he was questioning the laws, the traditions. When he explained to me how he felt inside, I told him he had to keep it to himself. I was hoping he'd snap out of it. He seemed fine for a while. But then he shaved his head. Like one of the men. It was suicide.
Lev shaved his head, which is strictly forbidding in their group, so they go on the run. These two have a decent character arc. Unfortunately, Yara doesn't make it, protecting Lev and Abby from the wolves after they catch Abby with Lev and ends up dying in a pretty brutal fashion. But Lev continues his journey with Abby. Lev shows compassion towards Abby, takes her side, protects her, and even tries to save his own mother, which didn't exactly pan out the way he wanted. Lev is seen as someone that grows and understands that what he has been doing to people for his group may be wrong. But Abby does the opposite. Her group, whilst making questionable decisions in the game, are mostly normal people that she is friends with, but she willingly murders so many of them. But literally, outside of Lev and Yara, nobody is memorable in this game. They did away with a fantastic character in Joel and gave us nothing to compensate. Not even a good story to boot, not one that makes sense. Lev and Yara are cool, but they are only side characters and they do not exist in the same realm as Joel, not even close. The story, as previously mentioned, is all about a cycle of hatred and revenge and how nothing good comes from this cycle. But the story doesn't evolve past this, literally at all. And when it tries to at the very end, it doesn't even make sense. So let's back up a little bit. Ellie, having witnessed Joel's death, is obviously on the warpath. Cool. Understandable, I'm on board. I want Abby dead as well. I want to kill Abby as much as the next guy. Abby's revenge is complete because she's killed her father's killer. Ellie starts taking out Abby's people, which prompts Abby to retaliate, obviously. They both come to blows. Abby comes out on top because she's built like a Dragon Ball Z villain, so obviously Ellie had no chance, and then she basically tells Ellie to piss off or face further consequences. So Ellie does piss off to a farm with Dina to live happily ever after. But Ellie, unfortunately, is suffering from PTSD like we mentioned earlier, and just can't rest with the fact that Joel's killer is out there.
Come on, little guy. Do you want to eat?
Understandable, completely get that. She tracked down Abby for that long and then got her ass handed to her and got Dina's ass whooped, so she decides, let me go finish the job. 100% on board. She goes through all of this trouble, tracking Abby down for months, gets into a massive gunfight with these fake Fireflies, who are the people that have now captured Abby and Lev, by the way, to then do what? What do you think she does? She lets her go. Yes, the climax of this game is Ellie getting to Abby, finding Abby in a weakened state with a ton of her muscle mass gone. If she was ever vulnerable, now is the time. Look at her. She doesn't look like Whitebeard anymore. She challenges her to a fight. She wins the fight whilst having two of her fingers torn off. And then in Abby's final moments, as Ellie is putting down the gauntlet, what does she do? She imagines Joel. And what does she do following that? She lets Abby go. I'm sorry, who the fuck wrote this shit? Wasn't the entire reason why we were so revenge driven was because all she could do was imagine and think about Joel? That was literally her driving force. The image of Joel on the floor, the sound of the golf club connecting with his limp body. That's what drove her bloodlust this entire time. And when you've got this piece of garbage character on the ropes, you finally got her head underwater as to finish her off in an extremely deserving death in my opinion. What does Ellie do? Imagine Joel again, except this time it prompts her to let Abby go. This shit makes no goddamn sense at all. None. How many people have been killed in the pursuit of Abby? On your side and hers, and here you are with Abby on the floor and none of it matters. Jesse, for as much as I don't care that he was gunned down by Abby, would not be dead if it weren't for you. Owen and Mel, who again, as much as I couldn't give a shit about, would not be dead. Not to mention the baby that Mel was carrying. By the way, they play the pregnancy card way too many times in this game. Again, it's like they can't figure out a way to make the player feel sad, so they just use shock value. Let's do this pregnancy thing over and over again. But anyway, all of that shit, all of this game, this unnecessary sequel to one of the most beloved games of all time, and then you let Abby go. Do you know how infuriating that was as the player to sit through? Naruto Shippuden does the whole cycle of hatred way better than The Last of Us can ever hope to. It makes sense in Naruto. You feel sympathy and empathy for both sides. Even Naruto is able to understand where the villain is coming from in his speech to him. What is peace and justice? Are those relative words? The Last of Us doesn't even try to explore this theme at all. It's just ruthless killing from start to finish, with revenge being the central theme, which is totally unlike Naruto, which has a full and coherent story arc. But in the end, after all of the shit that you put up with as the player, after all the shit that Ellie goes through, she doesn't do anything. No real explanation why, other than maybe she got tired of being the way she was in Abby's closing moments of her life. This is one of the most unsatisfying endings to a game that is already hard to get through because of its weak storytelling. Remember how I said the gameplay is too simplistic to warrant a 25-hour playthrough, and how all of the enemies do the same things, and so you end up using the same methods from start till end? You'd think the last fight would be a bit different, but no. You're literally just mashing square and pressing L1 to dodge Abby as she sluggishly throws haymakers at you. It's honestly such a piss poor ending. You had this whole setup with soldiers, the infected, a stronghold that was falling, that was on fire. You couldn't have Abby running through the setup, killing soldiers at the same time as Ellie so they could get to each other, killing the infected to get to each other, battling through parts of the decaying area that were on fire or collapsing to have one of them come out the victor. An excellent moment to blend set piece gameplay with a ton of brutality, gunfights, running, punching, screaming like a mad woman, and instead you opt for this press square fest until the fight goes nowhere. I know they were trying to be artsy with this game, but someone should have slapped them awake, because this final fight is amongst some of the most lame I have ever experienced. Before anyone says, oh, you're just hating because it's two women fighting at the end and not men. No, you're literally mashing square. That is why I'm hating. That's it. Oh, but the story is supposed to be bleak, so that's why it's like this. Shut up, blood. You think there ain't a billion other ways you can have a bleak, harrowing ending and not have it suck this bad? Really? Get your imagination out the toilet, people. This game does have its high points. There's no doubt about that. The flashbacks with Joel are some of my favorites, especially the museum one. Joel expressing his love for the prehistoric world was especially nice for me, since I grew up loving anything dinosaur related. And then the references to the Jurassic Park films was the icing on the cake. You really got to see how Joel had evolved as a character and how much he loved Ellie, which brings me to one of the reasons why I started to really dislike Ellie in this game. Ellie throughout this game can't stop being an asshole to Joel. Granted, Joel did stop her from becoming the vaccine, which is what she wanted, knowing she was going to die, but he did it because he loved her so much that he couldn't bear for her to go. Now, was it selfish? Yes. Objectively, as much as we love Joel, it was a selfish move, but oh my god, you have to be such an ass to him at all times.
Come here. What the hell are you thinking? Running off in the middle of the night like that. You talk to me. You don't just leave me a goddamn note.
Tell me, what happened here? If you lie to me one more time, I'm gone. You will never see me again. But if you tell me the truth, I'll go back to Jackson. no matter what it is. Just say it. Joel.
Making a vaccine would have killed you. So I stopped them.
Oh my God. Don't you fucking touch me! I'll go back. But we're done.
You shit-kicking, stinky horse-smelling motherfucker, you!
He stands up to you when a bigot starts in you and Dinah. He treats you with respect, and you can see the remorse and sorrow in his face when you ask him questions about what he's done for you, and even when you try to make amends, you're still a prick about it. I thought to myself, I wonder if I'm being biased towards Joel because I love the character so much and hate everyone else. So I asked my best friend for her opinion, who just happens to be called Ellie as well. If you had an immunity to a zombie virus and I took you somewhere to have surgery for it, but they said that making the vaccine from, I guess, your blood, I don't know what they were going to do with it, would kill you, and I saved you, would you hate me and call me an arsehole?
No, I'd probably be like, why do they need all the blood?
But so you wouldn't turn your back on me?
No! I'd be like, did I know that I wasn't going to survive?
Joel knew that she wouldn't survive, but obviously...
But that was too late, right?
No, it wasn't too late, it's just that, you know, he loved her.
Oh, but,
so,
okay, so it got to that point.
yeah.
So she went through all that shit.
Yeah.
And then right at the end he was like, fuck it!
Yeah, and then he basically shot her and then saved her, and then
I
she
mean, I'd
turned
be a
her
little
back.
mad, but like I wouldn't be like, oh, piece of shit.
There you have it, and I feel the exact same way. I couldn't hate someone that went to those lengths for me. Maybe be a little pissed at them because they've potentially doomed humanity, but saying you're done with them constantly and turn away from them, go fuck yourself, Ellie. Put some respect on my guy's name, man. Do not disrespect Joel like that. I understand this is incredibly anecdotal, but I feel like most people would feel the same if someone went to those lengths to protect them. Honestly, I came away disliking everyone more in this game apart from Joel. Joel is the only saving grace, and there is absolutely no need for a part 3 now. Is this Game of Thrones Season 8? Yeah, it is. Is this The Last Jedi? I imagine so. I haven't seen it like I said, because I watched all the other modern Star Wars films and wanted to vomit, but I imagine so. And do you know what all of these things have in common? They all broke records, but all also did lasting damage to the franchise. Star Wars had its gigantic name and the power of the Mighty Mouse behind it, and being the third movie in the new trilogy, of course people were going to go see it. Did it break numbers? Yeah, it smashed box office expectations as far as I'm aware, but from what I heard, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. I was never a Star Wars fan, but after all the modern Star Wars films, I'm not even going to give it the time of day anymore. Star Wars is dead to me. Game of Thrones is another one where Season 8's episode broke records, but the lasting damage it has done to the franchise is irreversible. I ain't going to invest time in a spin-off series now after all of that shit. From what I've heard, they've cancelled a bunch of spin-off series. So yeah, they broke records, but look what's happened to their name. The same goes for The Last of Us. This was coming off the back of one of the greatest story-driven games of all time, so of course, after 7 long years of waiting, people were going to jump on this. But even the people that aren't YouTubers, the people that don't exist in this YouTube space commentating on it, they're shitting on the game as well. My little cousin sent me this. This game was not good for the franchise, not good for its longevity, and all of these big time gaming journalists that are giving it 100 out of 100 or 10 out of 10 or perfect scores, they're all liars. First of all, giving a game a perfect score is just odd to me. As a matter of fact, a number system just comes with way too many issues, but how can you call this a masterpiece? Within the first 2 hours of the game, the story was already contrived. When you have to shoehorn scenarios into a story just to advance the narrative to get your new characters over, you fail. This game is a failure from a narrative's perspective. For all of the praise I gave elements of the gameplay and the general look, all of that falls flat on its face when the story is an incoherent mess. Like I said before, they can't elicit any real emotion from the player outside of shock value stuff. The cries of an animal or people calling out for their loved ones is a nice addition, but again it falls flat when the character you're playing as has simply no remorse for anyone. The overused pregnancy card is overused. The motivations end up becoming lost by the end of the game, making all of this pointless. It's just one giant shit show. When the leaks came out originally, I thought having context would make this game better, but it somehow made it worse. The context made it worse. The manner in which Joel died was war crimes level of stupid, and that is the best way to put it. It is a fucking war crime. You turned Joel into nothing more than a plot device, and his death didn't even amount to anything. After all the killing that Ellie did to get to Abby, it meant nothing. All those lives taken, Ellie loses her woman in the process, and for what? To sit on her bed and play a guitar? Nah man, I'm sorry. The ending is gonna go down as one of the worst to a beloved franchise of all time, and this story is gonna go down as one of the biggest jokes of all time. I think a lot of people have let politics get in the way of their judgment of this game. If you love it, then you must be a soy boy, and if you hate it, then you must be a feminist hating incel. It's actually neither. You can like the game, but objectively it does not make sense. That's just factual. They wrote Joel's death in a contrived manner. One thing I do totally understand is people returning the game. If you weren't privy to the leaks, you wouldn't know Joel dies so early on in the game because all of the marketing led you to believe he was a mainstay in the game. I also think that those that are saying we don't like it because there's a lot of females in the lead or lesbians or trans representation, I think these people want to create enemies out of nothing. It could have been anyone at the forefront of this game and the story would still suck. The sex scenes are cringy at best. I almost forgot to talk about these. Ellie's and Dinah's was a bit whatever, but Abby's made me laugh out loud. Seeing a man half her size bend her over, you know what? Let's just leave that. Let's just move on. She's going against her mate. Her friend is going out with this Owen guy now, and she's just there getting raw dogged. It's just like, do you have no remorse at all? Now, granted, she did cry afterwards, but you know, I mean, what can you really say? And that doesn't mean that we hate lesbians or butch women being at the forefront of the game. The game's story just sucks. Did this game succumb to wokeness? I think the fandom has at the very least. Somehow, if you dislike this game, it's not because of the story, it's because you're a homophobe. And I think that's a really dumb straw man way to try and win an argument. It's not because a white male lead isn't there, it's because the story sucks, plain and simple. So in closing, is this a good game? I'm gonna have to say no. Like I said before, this is a linear story driven game, and as good as the gameplay may feel at times, as beautifully animated as the world and characters may be, or as good as the acting and voice acting is, because it is brilliant, that all falls down when the story is a pile of shit. And that's what it is. It's just a pile of shit. They try to teach you a lesson in this game and they fail miserably. It is an unsatisfying mess of a game that has ruined the franchise for many. I'm sure there are some people that are review bombing the game for no reason other than the sake of hating, but I'm also sure that there were a lot of websites that gave it a 10 out of 10 that are talking complete shit as well. The game makes you play flashback here, flashback there. The pacing is all over the place. You don't care about Abby. It's a complete mess. And one other thing, the game didn't even launch with an online mode, and I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking now, but there's literally no reason for me to turn it on now. I had an unsatisfying ending to this expensive ass game with no replayability. But that's it. That's how I feel about The Last of Us Part 2. It took 7 years to come out. The gameplay is decent, but it didn't evolve past the previous generation. The characters are bland and uninspired. Joel's memory was disrespected for the sake of advancing the narrative, and the ending is so bad that I could make an entire video on how to do it better. This is the first time in a long time, and hopefully the last time, that I have to say that Naughty Dog has dropped the ball. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.
See, there's a sequel. Wasn't as good.